Hello everyone, and this is yet another seasonal interview yet with another champion. This time's on the line is going to be the America's seasonal champion, and we have today with ourselves none other than Erigby. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing great after interviewing so many cool people that won the seasonal, and now we're getting you as well. And first question, out of curiosity mostly, where is the name Erigby from?
That's a great question. I didn't think too much about it when I made it. So it's from a song from the Beatles called Eleanor Rigby. I was listening to that song probably about 15 years ago on repeat over and over again for about a month. And I needed to make an account. And so I've used eRigby pretty consistently ever since.
Oh, nice. It's nice to know that some people just throw their name there or maybe some number because someone else already taken it, but this name actually has a meaning, and it's nice to hear that one. Since you heard about it, we want to know a little bit more about who you are in real life, not the Legends of Runeterra player. So, who are you in real life?
I live in Toronto. I'm a IT support operations guy. I've been kind of working in that industry for almost 15 years now. I'm definitely a big foodie. I love to cook. I love to swim. I haven't done it in like a year. I miss it so much. As soon as with the vaccinations get rolled out and it's the gyms open up again, I'll be swimming every day. But yeah, that's a little bit about myself. I guess I could add like I'm a big gamer, like Legends of Runeterra, um, are just a couple of the games that I play. I'm super into RPGs, specifically JRPGs. I've been playing them since I was 5. The first one I played was called Lufia, Return of the Sinistrals, and I've been addicted to level ups ever since. And with Legends of Runeterra, leveling up your champs every game, it's kept me hooked.
The level up condition seems to be quite important for you, and you mentioned some games that you played before Runeterra. So, what is actually your history in terms of card games before you came to Legends of Runeterra?
Yeah, so I actually started with Magic the Gathering. I started playing Magic the Gathering when I was 10 years old. Everyone in my school played it, or at least all the boys. The girls hated it. Um, so yeah, I was one of the last people to actually try it out. It was a buddy of mine, Fred, was like, maybe we should try this out too. I was like, all right, fine. So we bought starter decks, we played, we had no idea what we were doing. I remember getting crushed by everyone in the school, and I hated it. So I went to my local store, and they told me they had like weekly tournaments. They were very casual. They were just kind of like round robin, pay $2. So I would go to those every week, and my mom was like, "Okay, if you want to go, you have to cook dinner." I was 10, so I would make craft dinner every Monday so that she would have time to eat that and like run out to the store so I could play. And so I'm very competitive. I did that, and that helped me to learn how to start beating some of the other kids at school. And it just kind of grew from there. You know, I definitely tried a lot of other CCGs. I played Pokemon for a good 8 months. I've played Hearthstone for about 8 years. And then, yeah, Legends of Runeterra I've played for about the last year.
Alright, and did you go competitive or more or less into the tournament scene in the other games, or did you just play casually?
So I definitely started out casually. When I was 16 years old, I met a group of friends that had cars. which is pretty key. And we became really good friends. We played Dungeons and Dragons. We played board games together, and on weekends we would drive to like PTQs, which are Pro Tour qualifiers in Magic. Sometimes we drive out to Grand Prix. We any kind of like I live in Toronto, so there were tons of events that were an hour away that we could go to. So we drive to those, and I did a lot better than a lot of my other friends. That kind of like I kept getting more and more competitive. Eventually, I remember skipping class one day in high school. It was near the end. My brother had to he forged a note uh, for me so that I could go to one of the events, saying like, yeah, he's sick or whatever, because there's no way my mom would have let me. Um, and I qualified for the Canadian national champion. So this, I think I was about 18 at the time, and that was super exciting. I didn't do very well. That was like my first super competitive level, but the next year I qualified again through ratings. So I went to Montreal with my brother. I told him to, I'm like, if I win anything, I'll give you like I didn't say half. I think I said like, I'll give you like 10% or something. So I ended up coming in second, and I gave him like $500 or something like that. So he was super thrilled too. He was amazing. He would like come and support me while he was like looking at the sites during the day while I was playing. And that was kind of the first big tournament that I performed really well at. And then, yeah, over the years, it was kind of off and on. Like I was in university, I would try to compete where I could, but sometimes, school kind of comes first. I still played in a lot of PTQs. I did qualify again for, um, I came in third at a Canadian nationals, and I went to Worlds, which was in Paris. And that was a lot of fun too. I remember having to ask for a lot of extensions from professors. One was amazing. She was like, "Oh yeah, my son plays that game. Like, yeah, you have to go. Just don't tell anyone else." That extension. So that was really cool. And then, kind of towards the end of my like professional magic career, I did qualify for Pro Tour Kyoto through Pro Tour qualifier that I came first in. And that was probably like the best experience I'd ever had. Like Kyoto is amazing, and just there's a lot of other Magic card players from around the world who are super friendly, and they were just great to meet. And we all kind of met and toured around the city for that entire week while we weren't playing. Yeah, so that's kind of my professional career. Probably that kind of ended around, I'm going to say 8 years ago. I just got bored of Magic cards, and I found the tournaments, especially the in-person tournaments, they're tiring. They're a little bit of a drag. Traveling to them got a little bit exhausting. And yeah, I'd kind of rather stay at home and play other games too. I find playing just one game all the time can be a little too much.
And after such an exceptional career, after all, in MTG, and then after all the games, what actually made you make the switch to Legends of Runeterra? What was the reason behind?
Yeah, so definitely part of it is the pandemic. I was super excited when the announcement came on for Legends of Runeterra. I was definitely hesitant to try it because card games are they're pretty overwhelming. Like there's a lot to them. There's a lot to invest in it. And like coming from someone who's played Magic cards as well as Hearthstone, those games are very expensive. I had also heard a lot of streamers that I watch play like League of Legends. They gave interviews about how they felt about Runeterra, and they were pretty negative. But eventually, I had time. I'm going to give this a shot, and I have to say those streamers. Um, I'm not going to say their names because I think they're idiots. I think when I first tried Legends of Runeterra, it was just like an afternoon. I was like, this, my attack, your attack thing. It's really weird and awkward. I don't like it. But I gave it a little bit more time. And I think what hooked me was just all the cards they give you and just the UI itself. Like you click things, things are flashing. They're like, here's some cards, here's some more cards. And I think what really got me hooked were expeditions. So in Magic, like I loved limited formats. There's a format called drafts where you kind of play in a group of 8 and you build a deck. Um, and they also have sealed deck. I'd compare expeditions to sealed deck, where you just kind of open your cards and you build the best deck out of it. But the whole concept of like once you win or lose, you get offered to switch a card or add a bunch of new cards. That's really fun. It's really exciting to be like, oh, I have this piece of garbage card in my deck. Maybe I'll get a chance to upgrade it something really great. Your deck kind of gets better over the games, or even if you lose, you can just play another one. And I also think the whole like I would get through my 3-3-1s pretty quickly every week when I was first playing Legends of Runeterra. I didn't touch constructed at all. So being able to just play like 10, 11, 15 expeditions a week, that kept me really engaged with the game.
And you said you started with expeditions, so what made the transition from expeditions to competitive or to ladder?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I get bored of playing the same game. So sometimes I do get a little bit bored of expeditions. I'd also just from playing so much expeditions, I had acquired a card pool. As of today, I own all the cards and have like 150,000 gems. Just I don't have any other things to spend it on. And I watch a lot of streams. So watching streams, um, you see people play decks, and it's like, oh, those decks look a lot of fun. I'm just gonna try it out. So I just try out decks. I remembered one of the first decks I tried out was Lux Thresh, and that deck was a lot of fun to play. I love Lux in expeditions. I love like that kind of mid-range control type of game plan, and I play that on ladder, and I would do really well. And then I, keep watching streams, and I see other decks that I'd like, and I give that a try. And when I started playing ladder, like it didn't take long for me to reach masters. I wasn't really trying to reach masters. I was just playing for fun and winning a lot of the time. So that was kind of my motivation. Is just enjoying Legends of Runeterra.
And who are you watching that made you go into competitive or into ladder? If you can give us some names.
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely watch a lot of people. The person I watch the most is BBG. And you'll even notice I play a lot of his decks. Billy Asol and Lux Fresh were probably the two most common decks of his that I played. But I do watch a lot of other players. I watch Fresh Lobster. I watch Alon. I can't remember his name. There's another Polish guy. I
Shihu?
Yeah, that's the guy. He's great. He's great when you want to play like kind of out there fun deck that are also competitive. I think actually it's probably the second deck I played. It was Braum Lux. What about back when Braum was like a 1/5 and super busted? That deck was a lot of fun, and like I think it was pretty close to like tier 1.5. So I played and climbed a lot with that. I'm trying to think like even now I watch some little streamers like Tippy Tips. He's on in the morning. That guy is he's amazing. Like he's on every morning, powering through. I think he's very underrated. But definitely BBG. I share his play style the most, so I usually like his decks more than most people, and I think his stream is excellent.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned cards like Lux that you enjoyed the most, so I need to ask you, do you have any favorite card from the current card pool?
Yeah, definitely. I would say one of my favorite cards is the Fangs. It's a great mid-range card, and it's not overpowered at all. I love beating aggro decks, so anything that gains you life is amazing, and I just like how flexible it is with the invoke mechanic. It gives you so much agency, and flexibility. So I think it's a strong card. It's a card that I love to play, even if it might not be optimal in a deck.
Yeah, it's definitely a card that's very flexible. It's kind of like a Zoe or a Specie Sketcher, but it doesn't have really a downfall because you get the lifesteal, you get the invoke, you get a bunch of cool things with it. But you told us about your favorite card, but is there any card that you absolutely despise or you dislike, or maybe more? Who knows?
There's so many cards I despise, especially in the current metagame. I would say the biggest one is definitely Lissandra. She's I can't even play the deck. I've tried it. I You lose to good matchups all the time because of impatience. But she is just like you queue up to her and you're just like, can I just concede? Like maybe I'll win. But I find you lose to the watcher so much. There's just a clock ticking on you. It's very hard to play around. And yeah, you have to be careful not to overcommit, not to undercommit. So hope she gets nerfed, and I hope she gets nerfed into the ground. I never want to see her in the metagame again.
And there
Um,
has
I
been some
sorry,
debate. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the only other card I'd say I hate is Lee Sin, but based on my performance and that deck a lot, so yeah, I don't hate it much as Contra.
I wanted to ask you because there has been a lot of debate regarding Lissandra. What should they do? Is Watcher to overpower their zero? And did you give it some thought? So maybe you could come with an idea on how would you like to see it changed?
Make Lissandra cost 11. I don't I don't want to see that card ever again. I know I am not the only person. Like a lot of people hate that card, um, and I think she needs to be nerfed to tier 3. Like she needs an Aphelios type nerf because people are tired of playing against her. And I'm gonna quote BBG here basically. She makes it so that no other control strategy is relevant, right? Because she puts a clock on you. Once I play 2 or even 4 8 costs, the game is over. There's no other control deck that does that. Any other control deck, you can interact with their win condition. Lee Sin is the next worst because he's also very difficult to interact with. But you can still interact with him. Like Lissandra, she's far too safe. Yeah, I would nerf her into the ground. I would make her costless. I want to be like somewhat realistic. I know Riot's not going to make her cost 11. You probably need to nerf her so that she needs to see the 8 costs C play, but I would even consider nerfing her stats and making her more expensive as well. I think the game needs to. We just need a change. Nerf her into their ground and then like buff her back um, in 6 months when people forget about her and hate some other card.
The cycle of life of a card in a card game. We've talked about cards that you like, cards that you dislike. So, do you have a card that you actually identify yourself with? It can be any card from the current card pool this time as well.
Yeah, It's kind of silly, but it's more not like how it looks, but thematically, I kind of identify with Abyssali. Abyssali is it's very innocuous. It's not threatening. 5 mana, 3/3, with elusive. Like you don't have to worry too much about it. I'm not a big guy. You don't have to worry about me. If you ignore me too long, watch out. I might just win a seasonal.
It has been quite the season because in the final we had two deep players. We had you and we had Random, which is very well known for the archetype and for playing it. But enough about the cards, and let's actually dive into what the tournament was for you. And I would like to ask you, how was the Swiss rounds experience for you? What decks did you bring there, and how did you feel about the experience there?
Yeah, so I brought the same three decks, just with a few changes to them. So those were decks I just played because I liked them. Like they were decks I played on ladder that I had good. I had about a mid 60s win percentage with all three of those decks, and that's really the main reason why I picked it. I tried thinking about other lineups that would work. Like I tried playing TLC, I tried playing Lee Sin, I tried playing as Draven. And when it came down to it, those were decks that I wasn't winning with on ladder. So if I bring those to a tournament, I'm not going to be confident playing with them. I also like with those three decks being decks that I liked. I thought about it a little bit more. I wanted to target Thresh Nasus. TLC was a deck that I know I'm going to ban regardless of what I'm playing, because of my abilities to not play against it very well. So that means if you're running TLC and Thresh Nasus, I have to be able to beat one of them. So I want to be able to beat Thresh Nasus, and I think all those three decks, I tried to tune them in a way that you can beat it. Probably my weakest matchup was deep into Thresh Nasus. Like they get the nuts and play a big Nasus, I'm in a lot of trouble. But sometimes you can still squeak it out with a Nautilus and an Atrocity if they don't. If they draw the nuts, they get an aggro hand, they play Thresh, they play Nasus right away, and they have Atrocity, you can't win. But the deck doesn't get that good of a draw every game. Um, and the other good thing about my lineup, it was very anti-aggro. And playing in NA, aggro is king. People love playing aggro here. It's not like EU. I think EU is much more control heavy. Um, so I ended up playing like against 4 or 5 lineups that were in the open rounds that were pure aggro, like Draven, discard, Draven Jinx, a lot of spiders, a lot of Nightfall decks, even a lot of like MF Gangplank aggro decks. And if you notice my lineup, like it has Withering Whales, and it's a lot of cards that have life gain, and a lot of cheap removal. So a lot, like I think my first 5 rounds I went 2-0 in all of them. They're all over in like 20 minutes. I just play like Sotari. I can't remember the name of the card. It's the 5/4 life gain. I just like made
Solaris
a
Sunforger?
Solari Sunforger, and the game would be over right there. Like that card really hoses on aggro decks.
Yeah, it also might be the sequencing because people think that aggro is simple, but actually, even if you draw the curve, you need to know when to develop, you need to know when to attack, and most of the people do as you say. They just probably overdevelop, they see a Solaris Sunforger, and they're alright, I guess my game is done, I'm moving next.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, I think a lot of my opponents misplayed. Uh, but also, like it, some of the cards are really hard to beat. some matchups are, I think, were definitely very in my favor.
Yeah, definitely. And what were the cards? Did you switch anything in the decks? Did you switch any important cards, or did you keep the same core intact?
I definitely made I made a lot of changes. I changed all. I definitely changed the deep and Zoe Vi. So Zoe Vi, actually a little bit of a funny story. Like all week, I was planning on changing my lineup. I was planning on playing Draven as. That's another deck I'm pretty comfortable with. I think it was pretty solid, but I wasn't as comfortable with it as my other decks. So I was watching the EU, not finals, but the bracket. It had already finished before NA even started, and I noticed that all of the Zoe Vi decks were very different than mine. There's kind of two versions of Zoe Vi. There's the one that has just a lot of one-offs of things, which make Zoe a lot easier to level, and it makes Submersible a lot less risky. The initial version I played in the open rounds, it was a three of everything list. Like I was running three sump dredges, I was running three the fangs, three get exciteds, which I like to beat some of the slower decks like TLC if I do feel I have to play against that deck. But just that deck I had probably played the least, even though I like the most. So what I ended up doing is I saw Fresh Lobster's list. He did all right. I think he won like his first two rounds and lost his third. And I have a lot of respect for him. So I'm just like, I like your list. I'm gonna take it. I made two changes to his list, just based on like card preferences. I think I took out the 6 mana sunburst. I think it's called, where you deal
Yes.
6 damage and yeah, it silences something. Um, and maybe that card would have been better, but I like what's check very quickly. It's the 0 mana the beam.
Oh, the thermal beam.
Thermal beam. Yeah, I replaced it with a thermal beam. And then what was the? I think I added. Oh, he had aftershock, which because I was planning on banning TLC, I replaced that with the get excited. Because I think get excited is you have lots of things to discard. I think it's uh, better against the aggro decks than I think it's called Aftershock. It's the 4 mana deal 3
Yeah,
or
it's called
destroy.
aftershock. That's the
Yes. And then deep, the main change I made to that is I put Thorny Toad into it. I'd done a lot of testing just on ladder, and there are kind of a couple of slots I was playing around with. So I played 3 Withering Whale in that slot in the open rounds, and the Withering Whales were good. I ended up switching them to 2 Thorny Toads and 2 the boxes, mostly because people were telling me the box was so good against Thresh Nasus. And Thorny Toad, I actually feel is amazing versus Thresh Nasus. Like, it's going to get a couple blocks in and going to gain you a little extra life. But Thorny Toad is, I would not suggest playing that card on ladder. I mean, maybe it's might be okay in the aggro metagame, but it's often just ignored a lot, kind of a bit of a dead card, and I ended up not really liking the box in the top, like in the playoffs. So I think the changes to that deck were worse. And I think in Ivana Asol, I made any change. Oh no, I did make a change. No, I didn't make any changes to that deck.
all
I like
right.
kept changing back and forth between the Fangs and Solari
Sunforger.
uh, Forger, and I ended up playing Solari Sunforger. But it didn't really matter too much. That deck got banned the most. So Solari Sunforger, like, just got nice stats, and it really helps against the aggro decks. I feel like that card it fits well in with Shyvana because you just want a lot of cards with nice stats. That's kind of your game plan.
Very nice, and we're going to get to those decks very shortly. But I am curious, so you made it through Swiss rounds quite comfortably, and then you see the top 32, and you see some players and some names there, and I need to ask you, was there any player that you were specifically afraid of, or maybe not really that comfortable playing against?
To be honest, I didn't know anyone. Like, I was I remember when BBG didn't sign in, and I was like, "Oh, good, I don't have to worry about him," because like he's a name I actually know. I guess I had heard, like I was kind of watching the broadcast I was going on, and I heard the casters talk about Random. He's the other guy um, running deep, but I don't know him. I don't know the scene, so I wasn't really thinking like I'm afraid of other people. And like I've played Magic for so long, I've beat pros in that game. Like I some people get intimidated by pros. That's stupid. Like the pros they're all beatable. They have bad days. They have bad draws. You can outplay them. Like they're gonna play really well. They're gonna make less mistakes, but they're not unbeatable. So yeah, no, I wasn't thinking that I'm afraid of anyone specifically. I was just more like, I hope I get good draws, and I hope my opponents don't. Um, or I just hope I get better draws than my opponents too. Or I think more than anything, I was like worried about lineups. I think that was more important. So the lineup I was the most scared of would be TLC, um, Ash, LeBlanc, and uh, Lee. Because those aren't aggro decks. All my remove was not very good against those. They're gonna uh, yeah, I was super afraid of all those decks. I felt I had to get lucky if I was going to beat them, but I didn't uh, expected maybe some people would play a lineup like that. But I also, based on what I saw in Europe, there were a lot of people playing some fun like aggro strategies, and that lineup is going to struggle against super aggressive strategies. So I didn't expect everyone to play a lineup like that, especially with how hard Lee Sin is to play.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, when you actually saw what you faced, was your prediction right, or were you surprised by any lineup that you faced?
I was surprised by all the other deep in the tournament. Like I did see a decent amount of deep on ladder. I think that deck is still underrated. I think it's a pretty consistent and powerful deck that just has a very good strategy. Oh yeah, there was a lineup that I thought was really innovative. It was I don't even remember his name. It's the guy I played in the semifinals. He was playing as Timo, um, LeBlanc, Ash, and TF and those were like who tests against those decks. Like I don't, didn't. The only deck I saw of those on ladder was Ash, LeBlanc, so I at least knew what my matchups were like against that. But when I played against that, or when I was paired against it, I just kind of had to guess what my decks were good and not good with, and make the best banning decision I could based on that.
I think people
Obviously,
usually bring in Estimo because they recognize this top 42, and in top 42 you cannot go aggro, go face every single time because there's going to be some player or most of the players that are playing control, and the game is finished as you said when they drop a Solaris Unforger. You just move next.
yeah, I think Timo as was a really solid choice, and I think I got a like I lost a game against it and I beat it once. And I think I was a little like I didn't really know how that matchup goes, but in retrospect, I think I was able to beat him using my Shiv Ace Hole deck, only because he didn't draw a Foundry. If he drew, I think if he draws Foundry against my lineup, I can't win.
It's funny you mentioned this because you mentioned the names of VBG and Fresh Lobster, and I remember a tournament in which they faced each other in the approximately exact same matchup. It was Targon Demacia, and BBG was insane at not drawing mushrooms. I think he was alive on 1 and 2, and he managed to finish the game just because Foundry didn't award him with one mushroom that could kill him.
Amazing, yeah. Like those mushrooms are it make for some really like nail biting games. You never know if you're just gonna get lucky and dodge them. And yeah, Teemo's a fun card.
Yeah, and it has seen a lot of play, but we've been talking about all this meta, all these strategies, so I think people really want to see the decks that you have, bro, so we're going to switch over to them. And the first deck we're going to talk about is your spicy deck that I think not many people would have expected, and that is Zoe Vi. And the first question that always comes to mind is, why this deck?
So Zoe is like my favorite card to play with. Like she's just so much fun. I don't think she has weaknesses. She's only a 1/1. But I had discovered this deck like 3 days before the open rounds. And I tried it on ladder and I just was like, wow, this deck is a lot of fun. I had tried early in my ladder experience playing Zoe um, Vi with only one Vi and two Victor. That deck I climbed a lot with. It's a fun deck. But I didn't really think through that, like, hey, that deck's weakness is Victor sucks. Victor is too much of a liability. So when I saw this, I just kind of instantly clicked, this is a good deck. I played it. It's strong because, and like in a tournament setting, it's also really strong because you have a bunch of one-ofs. It makes it hard to play against. Hush, like this deck has such a good matchup against Rush Nasus. You have removal to like kill their early creatures. You have Hush to deal with Nasus. You have Star Shaping to, you know, gain some life and get you a win condition. And Vi is so good against Thresh. So you're able to really shut down a lot of their threats and keep up with their card draw because you're generating a lot of your own card draw by discarding cards to um, your engines like Ballistic Bot, Goat, and even Zoe. Like it's very rare that I will cast her star charts. I'll usually just discard them because it's more mana efficient.
Definitely. And you said that in the first open rounds you went more safe, more free ops type of thing in terms of this deck. And then in the top cut you switched some of the cards, made them one offs or at least two offs. So I would like to know, for example, why are we playing one iterative improvements or one guiding touch? What's the reason we are seeing them in this deck?
Yeah, so Submersible is a really strong, like 5 mana, 5/5 draw card is really strong. But I definitely had a lot of games when I was playing three ofs where I would be low on cards. I'd need to play Submersible and he would be at 7 and 8. So when you have those one ofs, you're much more likely to be able to play him near the end of the game as a 5/5. So that's important. The other importance is it makes Zoe a lot easier to level. You don't need to level Zoe to win the game, but she's kind of like I would say you only level her in 5 to 10% of the games. But that's a good percentage of games that can win you the game that you otherwise would not have a chance. Um, Iterative improvement. That's a card that there was two of. I cut it down to one Um, if I were to play this deck on ladder today, I might even cut that card completely because it's a great card against slower decks. You want to use that on something you've star shaping to beat control decks. Against aggro, it's just way too slow, but it is versatile. You know, if you can kind of put the game on pause, like live long enough, it's definitely a good card. I don't think it fits super well into this deck. And then yes, some of the other one ofs like Poro Cannon I love. I've had some versions where I play two of that card. It's amazing versus Thresh Nasus because it lets you like keep up with them and use your gems and ballistic bots little damage things really well because you don't have to pay the mana for it. It also is a really good activator for Pale Cascade since it's burst speed. Um, so yeah, I think that card is great. Guiding Touch is just yeah, you it's never a bad card. You never like need it, but sometimes it can really help you like stay alive. Sometimes it helps keep something alive. It's really good against Drave and Ez when they're trying to flock something. You can really like ruin their day there. But yeah, it's like a lot of the cards that are one ofs I don't think are key to the deck, and I've even played versions of this deck with zero Pale Cascade. That card is uh, it's okay. Since it's nerfs, it's not I think super integral.
Yes, and when you conceived this deck or when you decided to play this, you told us that Trash Nasus was one of the targets, but what else did you expect to encounter and people to be afraid of, or at least get preyed on because they leave this deck open?
So this deck I think doesn't have bad matchups. I think it can beat like this is I think this is a very underrated deck. I think it can beat anything. Um, it You can beat TLC with this deck. You can beat Thresh Nasus. You can beat aggro. The worst thing that can happen with this deck is you just don't curve out well. But it has things to stop aggro. It has a game plan against slow decks. And it can play aggro against other mid-range decks because sometimes you just chip in for a little bit of damage. I've had a lot of games where I'll just use Spacey Sketcher to get the Joker, the 3/3 elusive flyer, chip in a little bit damage, get them low, and use your Get Excited and Mystic Shots to close out the game. So it's such a versatile deck in that you kind of need to decide, okay, am I playing control? When am I switching to aggro? Am I playing aggro right away? All the cards in here are good against pretty much, or useful against pretty much everything. You don't really have a lot of dead cards. Um, you have things to discard, like things that discard other cards where you can chuck some of your less useful cards. Like if you draw too many hushes against a deck where you don't really feel you need hush.
Since this deck is, as you said, so versatile and so flexible, I would say, or at least think, that it's not that easy to pilot as well. So, what difficulty would you award this deck with?
I've never had a problem playing this deck. I don't think it's that hard to play. If you play it, I would recommend that you just want a mulligan for Zoe, Ballistic Bot, and Goat, because those are your card generators. And then against aggro, you want Mystic Shots, Thermal Beams. Against mid range and control, you want Vi. You really just want Vi, um, and you don't want your removal as much. Um, I I would rate it like a 7 out of 10. Like I think it's definitely, or even like a 6 out of 10 in terms of difficulty. It's definitely easier than, in my opinion, than TLC or Lee Sin.
Alright, moving forward from a Targon deck to I think yet another Targon deck, we're going to talk about the Dragon's deck, the Shyvana Aurelion Soul deck. The same question applies. Why did we bring this deck?
I like ASOL. He's a lot of fun. I wanted to play Zoe ASOL, but I wanted to play Zoe Vi more. So I ended up playing with Shiv instead. That was really a big factor of my decision making. But I think this deck, um, it also has pretty even matches down the board. It does have some unfavorable matchups and it does have some good matchups. I definitely tried to tech it to make it more even against everything, and there's definitely a third hush in there for Nasus. If you're not expecting Nasus for some reason, then you could move down to two or even no hushes. But yeah, it's just ASOL's a lot of fun to play. Playing, leveling up, and playing a bunch of big things for free. And then Screeching Dragon with all the strikes is really, really powerful. Dragon Guard Lieutenant gives you a lot of great early game and even blowouts. Like if you can Dragon Guard Zoe or a 1/3 Ballistic Bot, it puts you really, really far into the matchup. And even like mid to late game, that card is still pretty relevant. I'd say Goat is pretty weak in this deck. It's just a nod. Like, I think the biggest mistake I see people in playing this deck, they will play two Dragon Guard Lieutenants, three Lieutenants, three Goats, and then nothing else until four. And what ends up happening is you lose a lot of games because you don't have anything to play in your first three turns. Like that, I think is the key thing about Legends of Runeterra. If you play nothing until turn four, you've probably lost the game. Unless you have like removal. And this deck, all your removal are strike effects, so you can't not play anything before by turn three.
And one change that we have seen from the usual Aurelion Sol Demacia decks is that people are not playing that cheeky one of Judgment, and we have been talking with the Southeast Asia champion, and they said it's more of a meta call. What was your decision to not play one Judgment or to go, for example, for triple Concerted Strike?
So for me, Judgment is a ladder card. It's not a tournament card. Um, you know, pros are much better about playing around it. And if your opponent is in it, like it's very rare for your opponent to be in a position where if you have Judgment, they lose, and if you don't, they win. Usually, the games against this deck either they get into such a good position that they can afford to play around it. So I just think it's a dead card. And concerted strike, I'd rather play a third concerted strike. I think like concerted strike is like it's so good with your dragons. It'll level up Shyvana. It'll make your other dragons a little bit bigger. It's amazing with Sunforger. Really good. Like that card is key to beating some of your harder matchups like Lee Sin. Um, yeah, if I was playing this deck on ladder, 100% one or two judgments. Especially in lower ranks, people are gonna lose to that card a lot.
Yeah, they just build up a big board and they attack with everything, and you continue passing with 8 mana. Guess what's going to happen? You're not going to like it, but it's Judgment.
Yeah.
Moving forward to the last deck, which was actually in the final, we got a show off of deep versus deep in terms of decks that have been played. So, then again, what's the reasoning behind bringing deep to the season?
This I like hesitated a little bit. I thought it was the weaker deck and the more vulnerable deck in my lineup, but sometimes I'd play it and I just win over and over again. Like sometimes you just crush your opponents because you get a really good solid start. And even when you don't, sometimes you can really squeak out a game with atrocity. I think the matchup against Thresh Nasus is more even. It might be even a little more favorable. I think it's very skill dependent, mostly on the Thresh Nasus player, how they play around a lot of your removal, like Vile Feast or the box, or just how they order their attackers so you don't get extra deep triggers with your Sea Scarab. Ultimately, this was a comfort pick. I probably had the most experience with this deck. Um, and I don't feel like this deck um, has unwinnable matchups. Like it can beat aggro, it can beat control. You can kind of tech it to beat either. Like if I were to tech this to beat Nasus, I wouldn't play Atrocity. I think, and that was a big change I had. No, I can't remember if I played Atrocity or not in the open rounds, but a lot of the time on ladder, I played to Vengeance, and Vengeance would be really key in killing a Nasus to just buy you more time to win with your Nautilus.
So why the Atrocity edition on the last second, let's say?
Yeah, Atrocity, like, just win you games you have no right in winning. So that's, and the other thing I like about just running one Atrocity is when your opponent sees it in your deck, it'll make them do silly things, like it'll make them be super conservative with their life total or just keep more mana up because they're afraid you could have it. So in a tournament setting, I think I really like playing with at least one. It did end up winning me a match. Yeah, I was able to beat a Lee Sin player because of that Atrocity, so it ended up being the right call. I think it's probably right to have at least one, even with it being nerfed, even potentially two. But it is metagame dependent. It's a pretty useless card against other aggro decks or even a lot of mid-range decks.
Um, my concern probably would be, are you not afraid that you are just tossing the Atrocity at some point? Or this is my main concern in general. Deep has polarized matchups because you toss, and maybe some of the cards that you toss, you'd actually want to draw.
Yeah, I mean, some of those, like all those, the box, Atrocity, Vile Feast, and Stalking Shadows, those are all cards like some games you're going to have them, some games you're not. You don't need them to win. Like the main way this deck wins, you win with attacking your opponent with Maokai. The more common win is you play Lure of the Depths. You play like one, maybe you're lucky and you play two. It's an auto keep card. It's one of the best cards in the deck. You get deep. You play Nautilus on turn 7, and then you're able to like play all your Abyssal Eyes for free. And you're going to get your Abyssal Eyes back because of Nautilus's level up trigger, even if you have discarded them. And even still, you're going to draw them from Lure of the Deep. You might get some from Jaw Hunters. You're going to get some random sea monsters from that. So the deck isn't, I don't think it's as inconsistent as people think it is. I think this is one of the decks that the community as a whole has not decided on what the best build is. I don't know what the best build is. And I'm watching a lot of streamers. Alan trashes on this deck constantly. He thinks it's garbage. And I thought it would be garbage too, but it's like, I'm going to play this on ladder, and I went 9-1 with it, so my opinion changed. BBG is another player. He actually played this deck quite a bit. And when I was watching him play, I disagreed with a lot of things he said. He did not like Jettison. I think Jettison is a must. You in a lot of matchups, you just need to get deep as soon as possible. And yeah, it's going to be dead a lot of the time. But you're going to be able to make that up with some of your strong sea monsters. You're also just going to like get players sometimes, like attacking with the sea scarab. They block, you double jettison, um, and you go from 23 cards to 15. And like you just kind of snowball from there. Some of the other cards that I have played and either don't love are trying to think of its name. It's 4 mana, draw 2, toss 2.
Salvage?
Yeah, salvage. Salvage is like it's playable in this deck. Um, I just want to focus on the game plan so much. Like I want to develop my board. So I like things that I develop my board and toss. Um, or I want to go deep fast. That card, like, yeah, it does help you go deep, but spending 4 mana to go deep and not put anything else on the board, it kind of sets you back too much. It's a good card against slower decks, but that card will usually lose you the game against something like Fresh Ashes or other faster decks.
It makes complete sense. And now that we have seen all the decks that you have brought, the tournament is done and dusted, and you fortunately won it. So, if you were to look back to your lineup and change anything, maybe change a deck, would you do that, or would you still go ahead with the same lineup that you brought now?
I would definitely play the same lineup. I think it was a fun lineup and it was comfortable for me. I might change a couple of cards. I think I would put back the Withering Whales over the 2 boxes. I think that's the only change I might make, only because I'm an impatient. Like I know myself, I know I'm an impatient player. I have a problem keeping mana up for the box because I want to develop, and that definitely gave one of my opponents a lot of wiggle room to play around that card. If you are good at keeping up mana, you are patient, play the box.
Definitely, and this has been a constant since the interview started about your decks and your strategy, and I think comfort is something that you value very much. Like you've been telling us about decks like Ezreal Draven that in theory would have been good, but you said you are not comfortable with it, you didn't play it, so why would you bring it? So, from a technical point of view, how much do you think comfort is important for a player that plays in such a tournament?
In Legends of Runeterra, it is like the most important thing. This game, unlike some other games, there's not really an optimal way to play the game. You maybe there is. I don't think we've discovered it yet. And it depends on who you're playing against and what deck you're playing against. Um, Sometimes it's right to pass. Sometimes it's right to develop. Knowing the difference, I think, is a really critical component between a mediocre player and a strong player. I don't think I pass well, and I know that's a weakness of myself. If you know you pass well, play decks that pass well. If you and take advantage by passing. You don't know when to pass, play mid range, play aggro. There's and that doesn't mean that those decks are less skill intensive. I can't play aggro. Like I play around too many cards when I play aggro, or I don't play around the right cards, or I end up holding back when I shouldn't. So yeah, I think it's in Legends of Runeterra more than any other card game. It's more important to know your play style and what works for you. Uh, it's only going to be a negative if we're in a metagame where there's not a lot of wiggle room in terms of the type of decks that are viable.
Also, because now the tournament is done and dusted, what is your opinion towards the tournament format or the number of rounds that you played? How did you feel about it?
Uh, it, I think the tournament is excellent overall. For me specifically, it was too many rounds. Like the playoffs were great. I kind of preferred the 5 round open rounds. 9 rounds is just you get a little exhausted from it. I'll play either way, and I know it's kind of hard. Like I wish it would be like 7 rounds and you could have one loss. I don't, maybe you could make ladder more as a more important tiebreaker for that scenario. Um, but I think the tournament overall it was super smooth. It was a really awesome tournament. The structure, like the whole three decks ban one, I think that's a lot of fun with open deck lists. Me personally, I would have liked fewer rounds. It's stressful.
Yeah, and I think reading between the lines of what others players say or what they discuss, I think they want lesser rounds not because they would like to play less rounds, but because it's so much exhaustion that they are being put through, and especially when you are not playing decks that are straightforward, when you are playing decks in which you have to take decisions, decisions are crucial, or decision might lose you the game if you take them wrong because you're exhausted.
Yeah, like uh, I mean, there's definitely pros and cons of both. And I'm glad they tried the 9 rounds. I think Riot was like, everyone complained about the 5 rounds, that it didn't give a lot of good players a shot to make it. And I think they're like, well, we hear you. We're going to make you suffer with 9 rounds instead if you like that better. So, we'll see what the feedback is. And if they go back, they do something else. But, this is only the second seasonal. I think there's only been 3. This is the second one I participated in. The first one, I think I like I didn't really practice or play much ladder. So I lost my first round and was like, all right, I'm just gonna watch TV the rest of the day. But it was relaxed, right? Like this is like you lose a round, you could win the next 5. Like you're just stressed all day long. You're like, can I drink more coffee? Like I gotta be well fed so I can make good decisions, and you're checking out the coverage in between. So yeah, I'd prefer less rounds, definitely.
Right, and what about the Riot Lock format? Did you get to experience any other tournament formats, or is Riot Lock the only one that you played in so far?
This is the only one I've played so far. I don't have any complaints about it. I do like being able to ban out a deck. That kind of solves. For me, I think it's a big advantage because there's always a deck I really don't like playing against. Um, so yeah, I hope that's always a part of the tournament. I think definitely solves like the problem if Riot has a bad patch where there's one best deck. At least that doesn't ruin the tournament, and I think it adds a lot of interesting strategy.
Very nice, and now we're drawing closer to the end of the interview, and since this seasonal was tiresome, maybe you had someone that helped you along the way, maybe screen partners or sponsors or anyone, because if they helped you, I think now is their time to shine and give them a shout out, why not?
I didn't have any help. I would say the shout outs I would give were to EBG having an awesome stream. I learned a lot from you. Alan, you're also amazing. I learned a lot from you as well. You have a really unique play style. And Fresh Lobster. I think those are the 3 streamers I learned the most from. Um, and yeah, his list for Zoe Vi was a big help. But yeah, I didn't test with anyone. I'm a ladder player. I'm a ladder expedition player.
So shout out to yourself, I guess.
Uh, I have good card game experience and instincts. We'll go with that.
Yeah, and it showed, and we hope to see you in next season as well. Now, before we actually end, if you had to say one thing and one thing only to the people that are now watching, what would that one be?
Play expeditions. Like there, you can learn a lot of good skills from them. Some players say they're a waste of time. I don't think they are. You learn a lot of versatility from them. They're fun. I don't think they're a waste of time. Also, and add a second one, I do stream, so feel free to drop by. My stream is twitch.tv/Erigby.
Alright, I think we're going to see you streaming very shortly, and maybe you're going to get a shout out or two on your stream from me as well. But other than that, congratulations again for the awesome performance, awesome win. Thank you for accepting the invite as well. And
Thanks for the interview. It was a pleasure.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, for concluding this interview, is it going to be the last? Is it going to be another interview after this? We do not know at the time of the recording, but you are going to get all four champions, don't worry. Until next time, see ya.